As a driver, operator, or engineer, you must be able to quickly and efficiently maneuver apparatus in tight situations and under adverse circumstances. This program demonstrates the correct positioning of pumping apparatus for different functions, such as fire attack, water supply, and highway operations. The training objectives are to present the factors involved in determining the positioning of attack pumpers, to demonstrate correct positioning for water supply pumpers, to show correct pumper positioning for special situations, to define and demonstrate staging procedures, and to present the tactical and safety considerations of operations on limited access highways. There are many factors to consider when determining where to initially position attack pumpers. Upon approaching the scene, notice if fire is showing. If there is no visible fire, it is usually best to park near the main entrance and remain with the vehicle until you receive orders from the company officer. If fire is showing, look for the best tactical position. In order to make a good decision, you will need to consider several factors, such as your department's standard operating procedures, rescue situations, water supply, method of attack, exposures, wind direction, terrain, and relocation potential. Your department's standard operating procedures, or SOPs, are your first guide for positioning the apparatus. You should make every effort to follow these procedures to avoid confusion. Your position will allow later arriving apparatus to anticipate your initial tactical maneuvers. Rescue is always the first tactical priority in any fire emergency. If you see an obvious rescue situation, position so that you will support rather than hinder the rescue process. Water supply is a consideration if an external supply will be required. If the occupancy is in a limited access area, such as at the end of a long, narrow driveway, a supply hose should be laid to the scene as you move the apparatus into position. Finding a hydrant close to the fire building can be an important advantage. An effort should be made to identify the hydrant closest to the building. The method of attack is very important to determining where to position pumping apparatus. If the incident will be handled with pre-connected hand lines, you need to place the apparatus so that the nozzle on the hose can effectively reach the seat of the fire. If portable master streams will be used, you need to follow your department's SOP for dropping equipment and positioning so that hose lines can supply the master stream. If the turret on the apparatus will be used, you need to position so that the fire stream can reach the intended target. Exposures and potential building collapse should also be considered. If the fire is threatening exposures, it will be necessary to position so that fire streams can protect those exposures. Remember that the apparatus itself is an exposure that must be protected. Avoid parking in an area where fire threatens the apparatus, or where you are exposed to falling debris due to a possible building collapse. Consider wind direction and terrain. Whenever possible, park upwind and uphill of the incident. If you have a choice, always choose a paved surface over an unpaved surface. This avoids the problem of getting stuck in soft ground when the area gets wet. And finally, remember relocation potential. The cardinal rule of positioning is, always leave yourself a way out. Pumpers are used for water supply operations as well as for attack hose lines. So it is important to know how to position the pumper when you locate at a distant water supply source, such as drafting or hydrant operations. Drafting pumpers may be directly supplying the fireground apparatus, or they may serve as source pumpers for hose relays or tanker shuttles. Although these operations are widely used in rural areas, you may have to use them in urban situations as well. To position the pumper for drafting, the driver-operator should stop before reaching the water source to connect the hard suction hose and strainer to the pumper. Connecting before you reach the water means you will not have to be concerned about unsure footing or water currents while making the connection. Try to position the pumper so that the intake is as close to the surface of the water as possible, while keeping the apparatus on a stable surface that will not allow it to sink into the soil or tip over. Keep the pumper far enough away from the edge of the water to maintain a safe operating position. Immobilize the vehicle with wheel chocks to make sure that it doesn't move during drafting operations. The hard suction hose strainer should be kept off the bottom of the water source during drafting. You can tie a rope from the hose to the apparatus, lay it on a ground ladder, or tie it to a float such as a spare tire or a plastic bucket. While it is important to keep the strainer off the bottom, it's best to have at least 24 inches of water over the strainer so that the pumper can reach the full capacity of the pump. In many jurisdictions, fire hydrants are the most common water supply source. Hydrant operations require positioning skills to connect different hose types to pump intakes. The preferred type of hose for connection to a fire hydrant is a large diameter hose, often called a soft sleeve. Intake hose sections are usually 10 to 50 feet long. To connect a soft sleeve intake hose to a hydrant with side intake connections, you should stop with the pump intake a few feet short of the hydrant outlet. This allows a curve in the hose that will prevent kinks. By turning the wheels to a 45-degree angle, you will be able to easily adjust the distance from the pumper to the hydrant. Bending the hose and slowly moving the pumper forward allows the proper alignment to connect the soft sleeve hose to the hydrant. For front and rear intake connections, you should stop the pumper a few feet either before or beyond the hydrant to allow the hose to be curved. Angle the pumper in the direction of the hydrant at 45 degrees or less, but make sure that you are not blocking the street from other emergency apparatus that will need access to the scene. Through practice, you will learn to judge the proper distance and angle to position the apparatus from the hydrant. Sometimes, the maximum flow from a hydrant is not needed. In this situation, 1 or 2 2.5-inch outlets may be connected to the hydrant. Sections of 2.5 or 3-inch hose may already be connected directly to the pump, making this a simple operation to set up. Some departments use 2.5-inch hose for supply line. This smaller diameter hose is usually in longer lengths than intake hose, and it is light enough to be easily handled by one person. The disadvantage of the smaller hose is that friction loss can restrict the flow, limiting the amount of water that can be supplied. This problem could become serious if water supply demand increases during the course of the incident. Because a smaller pump intake will also limit the flow, it is better to use an adapter to bring 2.5 or 3-inch lines into the pump through the large intake connection. Remember that a kink in a small hose will also significantly reduce the flow. In addition to regular attack and water supply operations, there are other special operations that will require your knowledge of how and where to position the pumper. Some of these special operations include dual pumping, tandem pumping, and sprinkler and standpipe support. Dual pumping is the term used when one strong hydrant is used to supply 2 pumpers. The advantages of dual pumping include better use of available water and shorter hose legs. In a dual pumping operation, additional hose lines can be quickly put into service if necessary. Here is a demonstration of a dual pumping hookup. First, connect pumper number 1 to the hydrant steamer connection using a large intake hose. This pumper will pump water through its lines to the fire. Next, position pumper number 2 with its intake close to the unused intake of pumper number 1. The hydrant is then closed down until the intake gauge of pumper number 1 reads 0, which is about 5 pounds per square inch or 35 kilopascals. Now, adjust the throttle if pumper number 1 is needed. This will equalize the volume of discharge with the intake volume so that the cap of the unused intake can be removed. Next, connect pumper number 2 to the unused large intake of pumper number 1 using a large intake hose. Reopen the hydrant completely. Now, pumper number 2 will be pumping water through its lines to the fire using the excess water that is passing through pumper number 1. Tandem pumping differs somewhat from dual pumping. In dual pumping, the pumpers are connected intake to intake. In tandem operations, the pumper attached to the water supply pumps water out of its discharge outlets into the intake of the second engine. This operation discharges water at high pressure because the pumps are acting in series. Positioning for sprinkler and standpipe support is rather simple. The apparatus should generally be placed as close as possible to the sprinkler or standpipe fire department connection. The correct position should be established during pre-incident planning. Most of the time, a fire hydrant will be located close by a fire department connection to a sprinkler or standpipe. This allows the pumper to be easily connected to both the hydrant and the fire department connection. If there is no water source near the fire department connection, it may be necessary to establish a relay to supply water. At many incidents, the pumper will not be the only apparatus on scene. Sometimes the order of arrival of apparatus prevents the best use of each unit. Such a situation can be avoided by a standard operating procedure for staging. Using an apparatus staging procedure permits the correct positioning of apparatus and allows the incident commander to fully utilize the potential of each unit and crew. Staging procedures for 2 levels of response have been developed. These procedures can be used in any multi-company response. Level 1 staging is used for initial response to a fire or medical incident involving more than one company. Level 1 will be used for all responses in which 2 companies, whether they are engine companies, truck companies, rescue, and so on, will respond. The first due company for each type of apparatus and the incident commander will proceed directly to the scene. Later arriving units will park or stage at least 1 block away from the scene, facing their direction of travel. While in the staging area, they should not allow their path to the scene to become blocked. The incident commander may order the stage units to lay additional supply lines, send in personnel, or proceed to the scene and set up. Level 2 is used in greater alarm situations when a large number of emergency vehicles will be responding. Incidents that require mutual aid or that result in multiple alarms will need Level 2 staging. In a Level 2 incident, the incident commander should designate a staging area, and companies should be informed of the staging area location when they are dispatched. Apparatus officers should report to the staging officer as they arrive. A fire department officer should take charge of the staging area. The staging officer is usually the company officer of the first company to arrive at the staging area. The staging officer's apparatus should be parked near the entrance to the staging area with emergency lights flashing. Other arriving apparatus should turn their lights off. The staging officer will maintain communication with the incident commander, and apparatus will be summoned to the incident scene through the staging officer. The staging officer should meet with police officials to be sure that the parked apparatus are in a secure area and are safe from traffic. The tactical and safety considerations of operations on highways and other busy roadways include access problems, limited water supply, safety of other drivers, and safety of fire personnel at the scene. Limited access highways are just what the name implies, limited in the number of entrance and exit points. Apparatus may have to travel long distances between entrances to reach the incident. The safety of other drivers may require that traffic on the same side or both sides of the incident be closed down. Do not drive the apparatus against the correct flow of traffic unless the road has been closed by police. Cooperation between fire and police personnel is essential. At least one lane next to the incident should be closed. Park at an angle so the pump operator will be protected from traffic by the apparatus. Turn the front wheels in the direction away from firefighters so that if the apparatus is struck, they will not be run over. When determining the number of warning lights to use at a scene, you need to weigh whether the lights may blind other drivers or create a distraction that could result in another accident against whether the lights are necessary for the safety of the firefighters working at the scene. Firefighters' safety at highway incidents is especially critical. Use extreme caution when getting off the apparatus at the scene to avoid being struck by passing traffic. Shield firefighters working at the scene by placing the apparatus between the flow of traffic and the incident. Pump operators are especially vulnerable to being hit by motorists as they step beyond the protection offered by the apparatus. If an additional apparatus arrives at the scene, park at about 150 to 200 feet or 45 to 60 meters behind the apparatus in use. The second apparatus will act as an additional barrier between firefighters and traffic. Water supply is often a problem because hydrant placement on many highways and freeways is infrequent or non-existent. When responding to a freeway incident, it is often beneficial to have a pumper respond on a